Okay, we have heard from the politicians on all of today's biggest stories. Now it is your turn. We're live and we're ready to hear from you. This is Raw Politics, your call. It's good to have you with us this evening. Now, we're asking you three questions. The first question, well, of course, it's about Brexit. How would you solve the Brexit deadlock? Because right now, there really is an impasse between London and Brussels. Now, it seems like a third vote on Theresa May's deal is off the table, but then she's not giving up. It might still be there, but now it's looking more likely that she'll come to Brussels and ask for a long extension. The problem there is the EU 27, they're going to grant it if there's a good enough reason. So again, an impasse. But what would you do? How would you solve this Brexit deadlock? Give us your ideas. I think we need to get creative now with Brexit, so do call in for that.
And when you're finished solving Brexit, we've got another one for you. Is banning the yellow vest protests a step too far? We saw an accelerated amount of violence the weekend, and French President Emmanuel Macron has threatened to shut down yellow vest protests if violent groups get involved and in certain areas. But is that really just, hampering our freedom of expression, freedom of assembly? What do you think?
All right, and the third question we're asking you tonight is, are artificial intelligence fears overblown? Now, Europe is trying to figure out how to deal with AI. Now, this is the kind of technology that is ubiquitous, whether we realize it or not. Computers are there, learning, relearning, gathering data on us, making decisions. But how much control do we actually turn over to machines? There's a lot of fear surrounding that. So is the fear of artificial intelligence, are these overblown? Now, our lines are ready. For those of you who tried to call last night, apologies. We had some issues there, but tonight all our lines are open. Do call in. Our phone number is 00800 3333 7002. And Philip and Victoria, they're ready to hear from you. They're waiting for you there. And also you can find us obviously on social media. We're waiting. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics.
And me and Tessa are here, and of course two of our great guests. It's a St. Patrick's Day lineup. Yeah, Andrew Byrne from the Sunday Times, Brussels correspondent, and Marion Harkin, independent MEP for the ALDE group, and also from Ireland. So we want to hear from you.
Honorary Irish tonight. All right, before we get to our guests, let's first get all the latest headlines from our team in Lyon with Isabel Kumar.
Good evening to you, Tessa and Shona. Well, these are our top stories. Dozens of people have been confirmed dead as floods submerged villages, roads and land across Mozambique, Malawi and Zimbabwe. Hundreds more are missing, and authorities say the death toll could increase dramatically. Survivors say entire villages were lost as surging, swollen rivers swept all before them. With bridges down and roads submerged, rescuers have struggled to get help to those who needed it. With 10 days to go until the UK is scheduled to leave the EU, British Prime Minister Theresa May is writing to the EU to request a delay to Brexit. The bloc is expected to vote on that request at this week's European Council summit. Well, earlier, the EU's chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, suggested the bloc will only support an extension if it leads to more unity from Westminster. And Philippe Barbarin, the Roman Catholic cardinal convicted of failing to report sexual abuse claims, says Pope Francis has turned down his offer to resign. Barbarin is appealing his conviction, but says he'll still step aside pending the appeal for the good of his diocese in the French city of Lyon. Well, those are our top stories. Now back to you in Brussels.
All right, thank you for that, Isabel. And if you can hear that in the background, there's very lively parliament right now. There's an event going on. Somebody's singing beautifully, in fact. All right, just for those, yes, singing beautifully. All right, for those of you who are just joining us, we're asking you three questions tonight. And those questions are, first, how would you solve the Brexit deadlock? So the UK, the EU, they're at an impasse yet again. So we would like to know your creative ideas on how you would solve this particular deadlock. And second question we're asking is banning a yellow vest protest undemocratic? Because we've seen violent scenes over the weekend, and Emmanuel Macron, he said he's going to get tough on those violent elements in certain parts of Paris, Bordeaux and Toulouse. So is that bordering on undemocratic? Third question we're asking, are artificial intelligence fears overblown? So are we Are there fears of giving too much control to these machines, which again, AI is in our everyday lives. We just, we realize it or not, it is there. So those are the three questions, and do call in.
So you have 45 minutes to do all that, so we have plenty of time. I might just go to our guests first, two people from, obviously, Ireland. But maybe for you, Andrew, you could give us a recap as to where we're at. We're asking people to give us their solutions to Brexit, but what do you think the likely solution is over the next few days?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think over the next few days we have a European Council summit on Thursday and Friday, and so Theresa May is expected to send a letter to the other EU leaders in advance of that summit requesting an extension. And the big question we're all facing now is what would the conditions be for that extension? How long should it be? You kind of get a different view from whoever you speak to in this town about what's most likely, whether it be a long extension or a short one. But if it's longer than 3 months, the UK will have to participate in the European Parliament elections, and that creates all sorts of difficulties. I think the latest estimate was that will cost £100 million to organise those elections. So that is a huge bill for a process that was supposed to save us £350 million a week, is now resulting in a lot more unforeseen costs, partly due to the failure of both sides to agree to deal at this point. So I think this is a big week. It's a big Brexit week.
Another big week, Marion. What would your solution be from a European perspective as an MEP?
I was interested in what Barnier had to say this evening. You know, he talked about if an extension is asked for, would that increase the chances of ratification? But the bit that interested me was where he spoke about the political declaration. And he did say, and I wouldn't want to misquote him, he said, I recall he said that this political declaration, which sets out the framework for our future relation, could be made more ambitious in the coming days if a majority in the House of Commons so wishes. The elastic has been pulled another little bit. Maybe there's something left in there.
Oh, there you go. Again, this is such a difficult topic, and you were saying also that today, this week is really crunch week because there has to be a decision, and it seems that politicians are having a really hard time. Let's bring in our caller now. Is it Brian from Glasgow?
Robert.
It's Robert. Pardon. Excuse me, Robert from Glasgow. So, Robert, do you have the solution? The question we're asking is, how would you solve the Brexit deadlock that we find ourselves in now?
She needs to go for the deal, because if we go out without a deal, we go out in World Trade Organisation, and the Irish borders is going to come up again. So I'd like to ask the Irish MEP, if Britain crashes out with a no deal, what would happen with the border?
For you, Marion.
If we go World Trade Organisation.
Well, I think he's absolutely right in the sense, Robert, that while there are imperfections in every deal, this is now the deal that's on the table. And maybe they can dress it up a bit more with a political declaration. And I don't say that in a way that I'm being flippant, because people have concerns and they need to be addressed. I mightn't share them, but I recognise they're there. So maybe in the political declaration, it can take that extra step that will allow MEPs in the House of Commons to vote this through. But the question you asked me was, if there was a no deal, what would the implications be for the Irish border? Well, in truth, I would be really frightened to think about it, because we could be looking at going back to the past, to the bad old days. And for most people, while the economy is huge, because we have an all-island economy, it's the peace process that really is bottom line stuff here. And people would be hugely concerned that over weeks and months, there would be a gradual erosion of that. And I mean, just to give you one example, Robert, I don't want to take up too much time, but I think the head of the Ulster Farmers Union, I hope I'm not misquoting him now, but I think his inference certainly was that he would like to see a deal done. Because just taking agriculture alone, the whole island works as a unit, and it would be catastrophic for the industry.
So, I mean, Robert, how's that for a solution? Well, an analysis. What would your solution be?
I don't see any solution. Whether we crash out with a World Trade Organization deal, it means that they're telling us we may be getting food cheaper. So an open border with Southern Ireland is it's fraught with problems. Nobody's thinking about the future of Ireland.
So
as if it's like put in the back burner.
So I think what Robert is getting at is that a no deal is not a scenario that he would be happy with, but I think the EU is already preparing. I think Barnier did mention that.
Barnier today, I think, said that the EU is prepared, and I think he urged all actors to complete all necessary no deal preparation. And, there was a time when people said a no deal scenario is never going to happen because the House of Commons just opposed to it. But more and more I speak to diplomats and officials who say that they feel that the atmosphere right now is sort of reminiscent of how we imagined it was in the early months of 1914. I mean, obviously we're not going to war.
Is it an indication
let's keep it in proportion.
To come, though, when Barnier says that?
Well, in a sense that I think what that was getting at was that we might be sleepwalking into this. And Barnier is raising the alarm and say we need to prepare. But to be honest, I don't think you really... we can't really prepare for all eventualities. And I mean, Robert asked specifically at what's going to happen at the border in Ireland if there's a no-deal scenario. I mean, the EU will insist that Ireland takes action to control that border for the import of goods that could breach single market rules. And then the Irish government will have to have the Irish officials say they'll have to have very difficult conversations, but we still actually haven't been told in reality what the outcome of those conversations would be. So we're still kind of in the dark on that.
Okay, all right. Let's bring in another caller, and thank you, Robert from Glasgow, for calling. So our next caller is Gary from Berkshire. Gary, good to hear from you again. So what is your solution? How would you solve the Brexit deadlock?
Hi, great to be back. Emotions are running high, regardless of the side that you have on Brexit. I think now is the time for us really to stop. I think the time now is for us to actually have a mass public consultation to decide which way the country wants to go. Because having another people's vote isn't really going to solve anything. What if that vote is flipped with the same numbers towards Remain? That doesn't answer the question. We have an argument on what the question should be. So surely the time is now is to actually come together, discuss, and then come back to the question when we're ready to have that conversation. And it just by having a stoppage of this, whether it be a long-term postponement or whether it be a revoking of Article 50, it takes the immediate pressure off. Now, there are, of course, the negatives on that because it could be seen to be dragging on. But for the future of the country together, we need to come together. Surely,
so you think
now,
more time
Theresa
is good?
May has to see that.
So more time is good?
Sorry, say again. Is
that more time? So basically, whatever comes afterwards, you're saying that more time would be good for now?
Well, Tessa, I don't think anyone round any table in the EU or the UK really believes that we're going to be able to solve this crisis in the next few weeks. The longer the period that we have, the more time we have to be able to discuss and come together. Because at the moment, most of the people that have voted are actually receiving nothing. Brexiteers are receiving nothing because, in all honesty and all probability, no deal's off the table. I think we can readily accept that, albeit the default legal position. Theresa May's deal doesn't offer Remainers anything. So we need to come together now, I think. And I think that whichever side is ultimately successful in this discussion and this vote and the way we move forward, if it doesn't take into account the side that's not won, I'm not really sure that continues to be democracy.
So, so Gary's talking about revoking Article 50 now. Bear in mind that has to be revoked by March 29th if the UK decides to unilaterally do that. How would that go down here in Brussels if they were to do that and then say, look, we want to come back to you another time? I mean, there's a level of frustration there that's sort of growing. Isn't that right, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, there's huge frustration, obviously, on all sides. A period of reflection, as Gary sketched it, could come about as a result of revoking Article 50. I think less controversially, it could come about as a result of a long extension, maybe a 21-month or 2-year extension, which still would create huge anger. And you can understand why millions of voters would feel, well, we voted for this, and now, 4 or 5 years later, it still hasn't been delivered. I think an interesting element to the conundrum facing Theresa May right now is that if she wants to, if she's unable to get her deal through and a short-term extension isn't long enough and there's a longer-term one, there's an issue where, in a sense, you'd want a long-term extension to work across the aisle, maybe between the two parties, and build a consensus or to revisit it. But the longer the extension, the more time it is for people to try and, I think, unseat her as Prime Minister. And the risk is, I think the risk in many EU minds is, if we give a 21-month extension now, is this just a green light to you to replace your leader, have a huge party civil war, and then we'll be exactly where we started, 12 months down the line. So the EU will be keen to avoid that, I would think.
Okay. I just want to read a comment from Huda Nahas, who says, a second referendum needs to be done. Many who voted for Brexit changed their minds and protested, requesting a second referendum. So that is her comment on the question of how to solve the Brexit deadline. Okay, Marianne, a quick comment before we go to a break.
Well, two things. First of all, and I spoke about this in the Parliament in Strasbourg last week, a number of countries, whether it was Denmark in 1992 or Ireland 2001, 2008, France, the Netherlands 2005, voted against certain propositions from here. But with dialogue and with talking and with coming together, citizens were able to see a way through that or around it or whatever. And we have to be careful. Will Brexit be a blip in the course of history, or a fracture? And I think, our colleague there has a good idea, but my question would be, extra time for what? And if you're going to have consultation of citizens, that is not an easy thing to do, because it seems to me, to some extent, that people have stopped listening to others who have a different perspective. But perhaps this is the time to try and change that. But it will be a huge task, but anything worthwhile is worth doing.
All right, so just to remind our viewers who are joining us now, we are asking you 3 questions. And the first one, which we've been talking about now, is how would you solve the Brexit deadlock? So it seems Theresa May is on her way to Brussels. Looks like that she's going to ask for an extension, but then the EU 27, they're saying, well, there's got to be a reason for that. Second question we're asking is banning yellow vest protests undemocratic? We saw the violent images on screen over the weekend, and Macron said he's going to get tougher. Third question we're asking, are artificial intelligence fears overblown? There are worries that we will surrender too much to machines. Are those fears overblown?
And call us, Skype us. You can find us on Facebook. Also, you can find us on Twitter using the hashtag #RawPolitics. Do call us, because our team is waiting to hear from you.
Welcome back to Raw Politics, Your Call. Now, before the break, we were talking about Brexit. Of course, it is an important week of Brexit. Theresa May expected here in Brussels to ask potentially for an extension, and what would the EU reaction be? So we're asking you, how would you solve the Brexit deadlock? Give us your idea. So that is the question we are going to be tackling in this section.
And we do have another caller, and because actually everyone really just wants to talk about Brexit.
Exactly.
Paul from Gloucestershire. Paul, we want to ask you what your solution might be for Brexit, but just bearing in mind we heard from the Irish Foreign Minister just moments ago, who said there's no appetite amongst the EU 27 to give an extension to the UK unless there's a really good reason for it. So that has to come probably within the next 24 hours or so.
Sure.
But Paul, what do you think?
I want to leave Europe. I voted to come out, like many others in this country, of Britain. I have faith in my own country, and I believe that our people can make it. We did before, and we can do it again. When we first joined Europe, in my father's time and my grandfather's time, it was the common market. We should stay in the common market and not be in the rest of what Europe wants, in a one-world army and a one-world government we do not want. Our country is a country that should have its own sovereignty, and I want our country to be proud and strong again, and I don't think we should rely on Europe anymore. They've treated us badly, Europe has. They've treated our government badly. Our own ministers ain't got no backbone to stand up to Europe and say that we're leaving. And the people out here are ashamed of our politicians, and we're ashamed of the European politicians. It doesn't give me much faith in our politicians. Personally, I'm angry, and other people are angry, and we want to leave Europe.
So you mean a no deal?
We should accept our vote. Our vote was a vote to leave. If you have another referendum and another referendum, it will happen again. Second thing is you did this to other countries. You forced them to have referendum after referendum until they submitted and gave in, and they decided to stay. You can't keep pushing the British people around. The British people don't want it. They want their country back. So please listen to the people.
So, Paul, you'd be happy just to leave at the end of the month into the no-deal scenario?
I want to leave, and Theresa May should say she's leaving straight away and not mess about with you people, all the other people. And the media should stop playing games and let the people have their vote, and we should be able to leave.
Marion, what's your response to that?
Well, I suppose, Paul, good evening. And it's important, I think, that we hear from both sides of the argument.
Because not from your side, I'll tell you that. That's a fact.
Well, I'd say if we look at the result of the vote, it's roughly 50-50. It was 52-48, I think. But I suppose the problem we face, Paul, I think, is how do you leave? My own personal view is I was heartbroken when the British decided to go, but you are a sovereign... Pardon?
I was very happy to leave. I thank God that we are leaving. I hope we leave.
Okay, I think...
Pray to God that we are.
Yeah, I think you will. I think the only question really we face
is just walking right past us at the moment, actually.
Oh, I see. The only question we face is, or you face, is how do you want to leave? Is it no deal? Do you want to be perhaps in the single market but not in the customs union, or vice versa? What is the best for Britain? What would the best be? And I think that's the debate that has to be in the House of Commons, so that you as a British citizen...
Are you a Christian woman?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
Do you believe in the Bible and what's written in Revelations?
I'm not an expert, but I believe in it.
Well, let me tell you something. I do not want to be in a one-world government and a one-world European army. I want my country to be free and have its liberty and have its democracy. And etc.
Thanks very much, Paul. It's a reasonable thing to want your country to have its democracy, and I think that's why the House of Commons have to try to find a way forward that all of them can agree on, because the only thing I would say, Paul, is that there are leavers and there are remainers, and you are all part of the one country, and you have to find a way together that's good for Britain.
Thanks very much for your comments, Paul. Quite a bit of anger in Paul's
and actually
voice.
What's interesting for me is that I wonder, because here there's a lot of talk when we're in this bubble here in Brussels about a no-deal scenario, the crash out. It's the worst case scenario. We're afraid of it. But then you hear people like Paul. I wonder where they say, look, let's just leave. Let's just leave without a deal, and maybe that's actually good for the country. I'm just wondering how much of that is.
People are absolutely sick of this, and the comment you hear when reporters or politicians knock on doors or ask the public is they should just get on with it. And I think probably, I'm no psephologist, but 90 to 95% of people, their minds are made up on this. They're not going to shift. I mean, there has been some shifting towards Remain, and if you were to have the vote a second time, which people I think rightfully have ethical questions around, it could go the other way, but only in a marginal sense. And the trouble is, another caller said, well, we need more time to reflect on it.
Right.
More time is not going to matter to 95% of people. People's views are set. They're not willing to change them, and you can respect that.
Do you think the fear of a no deal is more on the politicians and the journalists who are talking about it rather than the people who voted to leave?
Well, I think what's interesting is I think no deal is unpopular among most groups except for Conservative Party members and voters. It's actually quite popular in that group, and that makes it difficult for their MPs to compromise with Labour on this to get a softer Brexit through.
And it's interesting, I think, that we had, as you know, with Nice and Lisbon, 2 referenda on each, but there was never that deep division in Ireland
which we do
around the issues. But you see, I think the reasons that many people voted to leave were different. Of course, there were some similarities, but there's something that people feel in their gut here. And when you feel something that strongly, then you don't change your mind generally.
Absolutely.
Right, wrong, good or bad, you don't change your mind.
Okay, quick comment, because I'm going to bring in a caller.
Brief on this, and I think as well, because I think Paul mentioned this. I mean, I think most EU leaders and officials agree with Paul that it's time for the UK to leave. That there's little point in hoping for a reversal.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I think most EU countries are with Paul in this. That the decision's made, but that still doesn't solve the problem of how you do it.
All right, let's bring in another caller, Derek from Aberdeen. Derek, thanks for joining us tonight. So what do you think? How would you solve the Brexit deadlock?
Well, I think listening to some of your comments tonight, it really is an interesting debate. But for me, it's just about democracy. Nigel Farage ran a protest about Britain being in the EU. Cameron then gave us the referendum to leave or to remain in the EU. We voted to leave. The democratic principle should be then that government said, we're going to leave the EU. If future parties in the UK want to rejoin the EU after the 29th of March, they should run in a manifesto in the next general election to say we want to rejoin the EU. But we should leave. It's a democratic principle. And what surprises me about the European Union is, yet again, they fail to understand democracy. They fail to understand the democratic will of the British people was to leave the EU. 52-48. Yes, I know it was close, but...
Yeah, so let's let Marianne to respond to that.
But I think, to be fair, while initially a lot of people were disappointed about it, and I was one of them, I think we do recognise that democracy matters here. And I think we've already said that at this point, many EU leaders, many people in this House, we don't want to see the UK going. We would much prefer to work with them as close partners. But you've decided to go. All we now need to find is, or you need to find, is a way you can leave that will minimise the damage to your economy and to ours. And that's proving very difficult.
And I suppose some parts of the UK voted to stay and others voted to leave. So even the leader, the First Minister in Scotland, where you are, says that the Scottish democratic will has not been exercised by leaving the EU. So, you could interpret democracy in so many ways. Derek?
Surely a free trade agreement is the way forward. I mean, a free trade agreement with the European Union, you've just entered in a free trade agreement with Japan, for God's sake. We are your biggest market. Why would you not want Britain to just go on its own, be independent, and have a free trade agreement with the European Union? I don't understand why that's a problem.
It's not that the EU doesn't want that.
They do want that.
The EU do want a free trade agreement with the UK. Now, how easy it will be to strike these things take years, fine, but there's a willingness there. But the difficulty is they have made a point of, and the UK accepted that the talks on that could not begin until the method of leaving the EU is decided. So that's a really
method of leaving the method of leaving the EU for the United Kingdom is two ways. We either can look forward to a free trade agreement with you, whether it takes 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, or 15 years, or the UK can go on to WTO organisation rules, just like most of the rest of the world, and carry on trading. Now, the effect on European jobs will just be as bad as, if you're right, and the effect on British jobs. I don't think anybody wants that. So surely to God, at the end of the day, if we want to be partners and friends in the future, a free trade agreement is the obvious outcome, and it should be able to be done pretty quickly. We have the same, we follow the same rules. We have the same workers' rights. We have the same democratic rights. You people in Europe, what's the difference? I don't.
Well, but I mean, I agree with you, Derek. But you're.
I don't understand why this has been so hard.
But
Thank you, Derek.
I guess Derek's got a point. Why has it been so hard? But I mean, the obstacle to this is not actually right now. It has the appearance is not actually Michel Barnier. The obstacle to this right now is the MPs in the House of Commons voting through a deal that allows the UK to leave to strike the free trade deal that Derek wants.
Exactly.
And so. I think that's where the real focus has to be, because that's where the obstacle is.
And Derek, just to ask you a question, would you support Theresa May's deal? Would you see that as a way forward if the House
as a solution?
No, I think May's deal makes the United Kingdom a colony of the United States of Europe. I don't want anything to do with that. I think
how would you deal with the Irish border?
All right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I think the Irish border situation. I don't know the answer to that. I think it's crazy for Irish politicians to be sitting on this programme saying that if Britain leaves the EU, that so for some reason after 24 years of peace, the Irish people are going to go back to bombing and kill each other. I don't believe that. I don't think anybody in the UK believes that. I don't believe that either. I think that's a nuts argument.
All right.
And we should just be thinking about leaving the European Union, and if at some point in the future Britain wants to rejoin it, the political parties stand here in the next general election.
All right.
And
Okay.
say,
Derek,
if we want to read
thank you. Really appreciate your thoughts and your insights tonight for joining us on the program. Thank you. That's Derek from Aberdeen. All right, just for everyone else who are watching, we're asking you 3 questions tonight. As you heard there from our last caller, we're asking about Brexit. How would you solve the Brexit deadlock? Second question we're asking, is banning the Yellow Vest protests undemocratic in France? And third question, are artificial intelligence fears overblown? So those are the 3 questions.
We want to hear from you. Our team is ready to take your calls. You can also find us on Twitter with the hashtag #RawPolitics, or Facebook, or of course Skype, which is also free, and we'd love to see your face.
Go badly.
Welcome back to Raw Politics, your calls. So tonight we're discussing Brexit. I think almost all of our callers are calling in to give their thoughts on Brexit. So the question we're asking is, how would you solve the Brexit deadlock? All right, let's bring in Margaret from Yorkshire. Margaret, what about you? How would you solve the Brexit deadlock?
Well, I'm a Leave voter, actually, but how I would solve it is I'd keep the parts that everybody agree with. I would bring the customs union, but it would have to be, freedom of movement is what a lot of people are against. Do something about that and then hope that it would pass again.
What do you guys think about that?
Well, it's the most succinct suggestion I've
Yes,
heard
it
today.
is.
So full marks to
years,
Margaret for that.
In 2 years, I would say, Andrew.
In 2 years, yes.
Yeah, so that's single market customs union without freedom of movement for people. I think that has a lot of attractive elements to it.
But then the EU will say, here we go again, cherry picking.
Yep.
Exactly. You're choosing what you want and not what you don't want.
Yeah, but look, I think most British people, that is in essence what they've been uncomfortable with in recent years.
Well, you don't hear about it as much anymore, though, Andrew. It's much more about the ability for the UK to do its own trade agreements, and that's the customs union. So, if you choose one, you'll have a raft of people saying yes and another raft saying no because my priority is trade. And another raft, if you choose single market, is, oh no, my priority is freedom of movement. And they're indivisible, the 4 freedoms. So,
but Margaret, what matters to you? Is it the freedom of movement bit, or is it that the UK should be able to do its own free trade movement?
That was a real main sticking point with people.
During the referendum.
One thing I thought was interesting. Sorry, Margaret, go ahead.
You could work a deal as you went along. There are things put in the thing that she's, what she's proposed already. That's a trade deal. That's got to come later. Hasn't it?
It does. It does.
Yeah. That could be worked out alongside somehow. I'm not a negotiator.
I always was struck by the fact that many countries in the EU can have some restrictions on the right of other Europeans to come and work and stay in their countries. In Belgium, for instance, if you are an EU worker and you come to Belgium and you don't have a job after 3 months, or is it 3 or 6 months, the Belgian government will ask you to leave. And I think there should be more. I think more efforts should have been made to offer those kind of solutions to the UK.
To given to people that there are constraints and limitations to freedom of movement. But we won't solve that issue tonight.
No,
Margaret, thank you so much for being incredibly succinct and direct there. And we also have Frank from the Netherlands. Frank, what is your solution to Brexit?
My solution would be, and I follow a long time this Brexit thing, that maybe Prime Minister May has to ask the EU that instead of Ireland within the EU, that Ireland is going out, so that the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland will disappear. But then maybe the EU can help Ireland in order to give them, let's say, an embassy or what. So the backstop is always, in my opinion, was a problem for the House of Commons. So I think if Prime Minister May would ask then the EU, maybe then this whole mess will be gone.
All right, thank you for your idea there, Frank from the Netherlands. I think Frank is touching on the point that the Irish question is definitely very difficult here. Marianne, you wanted to react to what Frank was suggesting there.
Well, for a start, we'd be saying that the decision of one country would be the decision for another country. I mean, at this point in time, these figures always vary, but something like well over 80%, 85% of Irish people want to stay in the EU. We recognise, Frank, that as there's pluses and minuses to everything, but as a small country, our opportunities for trade, our opportunities that the EU provides, etc., we could not get that anywhere else. Of course, we could look to do trade deals with the rest of the world, but on your own, you do it on somebody else's terms. You are, you know, you take what somebody gives you. So a country like Ireland, particularly, recognises that very clearly.
Strength in numbers, essentially. You're better off with the might of the EU rather than on your own.
For that. And also, the UK is a signatory to the Good Friday Agreement, which is an international agreement. And that's really where the backstop is coming from. So it's a very difficult circle to square.
No, it is.
But I think, as I said before, Barnier has slightly, I won't say opened the door, but he stretched the elastic a little bit more, what he said today. I thought, actually, that Theresa May had a chance of getting through this week. I don't think May's deal is dead in the water yet.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
You're giving people some hope.
I know.
Anyway, there, Marion. I don't know if
she doesn't think it's dead in the water yet.
And also, Michel Barnier, would he agree that he stretched the elastic? I don't think so.
All right. We'll go for a quick break and we'll be right back. Right, welcome back to Raw Politics, Your Call. So the question we're asking, just to remind you, is how would you solve the Brexit deadlock? We had a lot of callers on Brexit tonight.
We got some really good ideas, and we've got another one, I think, from Isaac from Manchester. Isaac, real quick, how would you solve the Brexit crisis?
Well, the problem seems to me is a backstop. Within the easiest way is for Ireland to have a referendum to be a united Ireland, and that will solve everything very quickly.
Well, that is another great, succinct suggestion. What do you think, Marion? You're a politician. On the doors, is that something that people might agree with, or that's very complicated?
I think the issue that we face is that while we might have a referendum, there's no guarantee it would be carried. And even if it were, I think a lot of people in the Republic, while in their hearts and their minds, I think the vast majority would like to see a united Ireland, but it has to be by agreement. The unionists, at least most of them, have to want to be part of Ireland. And 52-48, you know, would be a bad outcome in my view.
Just before we wrap up, Andrew, what do you think? I mean, it was a solution that has been mooted, complicated, something that could ever be on the table. What do you think?
I don't think the conditions are there to have a unification referendum in Ireland. I don't think, first of all, I don't think the Irish government yet have a detailed plan for, if the vote was carried, how you would even go about uniting those two parts of the island together. That's a lot of work. It's going to take some time. And I think, if anything, we've learned anything from this referendum, it's that a narrowly won referendum makes for very bitter divisions, and it's just the beginning of the solution. It's
very
not
interesting
the end
point,
of it.
though,
Not
Isaac,
the final word.
for sure. That was
thank you, Isaac from Manchester there. So where does this leave us? I mean, we're heading into summit week, Theresa May coming. Okay, what are we realistically expecting, Marion? Very quick from both of you. What are you realistically expecting?
Well, I've said it before. I am realistically expecting that May is going to look at this again and find a way to try and bring people on board, which is what she should have done in the beginning. I don't think it's over just yet.
Okay.
This part of it.
Okay, now we'll just have to go to tonight's Raw Politics last word. Okay, so this one is coming from Herman van Rompuy. He is the former European Council president. He said, this is to his Belgian political party, the British are much more dependent on us than we are on them. I am personally convinced that if the UK leaves the EU, they will return one day. That is what Herman Van Rompuy says. Something to think about as we head into the EU summit.
He said if they leave as well.
If they leave, they will come back. So there you have it. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for your calls and texts and your Skypes and Facebook and your tweets.
We wish we had more time. We had, a lot more time to get all your comments in, but thank you again. Have a good evening.